meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for Monday, March 9th. Our first order of business tonight is approval of the agenda. With that, I'd like to propose a change to the agenda of taking item 5 and moving that to the front of the agenda because that needs to be approved prior to the budget amendment itself. So with that, were there any other changes or additions to the agenda? All right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the agenda is approved. Next, we move on to approval of the minutes for February 24th, 2020 meeting. Did anyone have any changes or additions to the minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. First, we do have somebody here to speak, and it is about something on one of the items on the agenda. However, we'll have them speak at the beginning of the meeting because it's just, we don't have both sides. So, but we did decide to offer that up. So we have Paula Slattery here from the Teamsters to speak about item 2020-76. Welcome, and if you take about 3 minutes,
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Members of the committee, I do have a handout for everybody, as well as one for this recording secretary. Is this fine here?
Yep.
Thanks. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. My name is Paul Slattery. I am the political director for the Teamsters Union, Local 120. We currently represent about maybe 500 Metro Mobility on-demand drivers, and I'm here to speak about item number 2020-76. This was brought to my attention last Friday, so again, I'm getting on this kind of late. So what this is, you know, I was here a couple weeks ago, and we're losing about 170 Metro Mobility drivers. The Teamsters are to another contractor, but these are more of the jobs that our members are currently enjoyed that are going to be subcontracted out to a different employer. And when I read about it, I was originally upset about the loss of jobs, and but then after I got digging in more to the paperwork that I handed you, so I handed you the agenda item, a little bit of a news story about how and why Metro Mobility is decided to subcontract out this work to Lyft is the company, and then I believe there's a taxi company. I can't remember the name of it right now. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to raise 8 issues that I'm concerned about and that I think that you should be concerned about too. The new provider, Lyft, they will not provide door-to-door service. It says in the documents that you have, it's only going to be curb-to-curb service. Currently, all the participants in Metro Mobility on-demand service enjoy door-to-door service. The drivers even will bring their groceries up to their door for them. The drivers are not tested for drugs or alcohol like our drivers are. The vehicles do not have to be inspected like the current Metro Mobility vehicles do. The drivers are not allowed to use cash or their to-go card. They would have to have a credit card or a debit card with a bank. That's for the users. The drivers are allowed to have a minimal amount of insurance. I don't believe they have to carry the same amount of liability insurance that the current Metro Mobility providers carry. The drivers do not need to do any training for transporting disabled adult. The current drivers all go through what's called STS training to learn how to provide services to the disabled community. And the drivers do not need to pass criminal background checks. That's a very, very big concern for me. Now I'm not speaking just only for the drivers, but for the disabled community in general. I'm very concerned that these drivers do not have to pass criminal background checks, and they're going to be transporting vulnerable adults. I just think that opens up the door to like predatory stuff. You know, that's my fear. That's my concern, that we don't really know who these drivers are. And then the other thing is in the packet you'll see and in the presentation that Lyft is subcontracting out to another company. Uh, I think it's like Delivery for All or something like that, just to do their wheelchair work. Because a lot of Lyft drivers, they don't have a lift. They're just driving a regular transport vehicle. That's just another layer. Like, I don't know, we don't get to know anything about their third-party service provider, and it just gets too far out into the distance. I don't know about their contract, or if they're going to be using this contractor one day, a different contractor another day, and I just believe there's too many unanswered questions. So the last thing I want to say is I did provide you with the questions and answers from the Metro Mobility Task Force. It's in your packet. I suggest you read those questions and read those answers carefully because they don't even have to apply to the same rules that a taxi cab driver would, under a taxi cab ordinance. They're immune from that. And the other thing is about, we talk about DBEs and jobs for people of color and stuff like that. I've worked with a lot of taxi cab drivers out at the airport, Post Road. They do all the airport stuff for our airport. It's predominantly all African American. When Lyft came in, that really hurt them. They lost a lot of business to Lyft. There is a huge community of East African workers out at Post Road at that airport that would love to have these jobs that Lyft is going to get. And I know I'm probably over time. Thank you very much for hearing me out. And really, take a big concern before you allow someone you don't really know much about to transport our vulnerable adults. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Slattery. Next, we move on to the TAC report. Mr. Fenley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. David Fenley with the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. My update will be short again this month. We don't pass many resolutions, but last week we passed 2 resolutions. It was the culmination of about 3 years worth of discussion. The first resolution we passed is that we will support increasing the amount of priority/accessible seating on fixed route buses. And the second one that we passed was TAC supports an awareness campaign on the uses of priority/accessible seating and its importance to people with disabilities, transportation, and the general public. I'm happy to chat more about that if you want, but that's what we did for the majority of the last meeting, and that's all I have for you today.
All right, thank you, David. Any questions? Very good. If not, we'll move on to reports. We have MTS Director Thompson.
Madam Chair, members, just one minor update tonight is you all received an invite last week for the first of a few workshops that we'll be hosting with policymakers in the region, including all the council members, tab members, local officials, some nonprofits, and others that will try to have a discussion about transit values and what some performance measures that we should have within our TPP in region as we define where transit services should go. We have a defined set of performance measures, and you'll hear about those, or you've heard about those you'll hear some tonight a little bit on the agenda around subsidy per route and performance number of passengers per hour. But we have a feeling that there's some other measures that we keep hearing about from our stakeholders, policymakers, that maybe we should expand that. And so this is the beginning of that process, is to take input from policymakers. There'll be a series of workshops where we present information and get feedback from a broad range of policymakers. This goes along with the Network Next work that's underway. It'll fit together, and we'll go into our next TPP update, not this one this year, but the one after that. And so we encourage you to attend if you can. If not, you'll receive updates on the outcome of that also. And so, Madam Chair, that concludes my report from MTS.
Any questions for Director Thompson? All right, if not, we'll move over to General Manager Poistra.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'll start with talking a little bit about our coronavirus planning, since I'm sure everybody's thinking about that. The first thing I want to stress is that we're committed to communicating with our employees and with our customers. We know that that's important in situations like this, and we have committed that we're going to communicate to employees and customers on a weekly basis at least, and more often as the situation requires. We already have some information up on our website. I've been going around to starting my tour of the garages and the OMF facilities and the overhaul base, and been to 2 so far, and I have 4 coming up this week. And they're asking questions about that, but they're really good questions. They're reasonable questions, and I think again that we're being reinforced on the importance of communicating with our staff and communicating with our customers so they know what we're doing. I'll mention that Terry Dressen's here, and she's leading the communications for the Metropolitan Council. Leslie Canderas, who's also here, is very much involved in our work, and Vince Pellegrin, who is the incident commander. We have a structure in place that's based upon our continuity of operations planning, and that structure has been, and we've started to work within that structure now. We have a continuity of operations plans. I don't think it's been before this council, but it was before the last council who approved it, that are really put together just for these cases, and we put that structure in place. Vince Pellegrin, our Chief Operating Officer, is also the incident commander for the entire council, and Terry Dressen, as I mentioned, is the communications lead for the entire council. And the council's plugged into the health department, and Metro Transit, of course, is plugged into the council. And we are trying to address this in a way that is supported by science, supported by the recommendations of the health department and the best information we can get. To that regard, we're looking at how we should change our cleaning routines and structures, and we've already started to do that. We did a deep cleaning of all our buses over the weekend. We're going to be doing that on a more frequent basis, and we're already using the products for cleaning that are recommended by CDC and the health department as being effective for disinfectants. But in the end, it really the best approach to this, the most effective approach is to communicate to our customers the importance of the classic: don't ride if you're sick, wash your hands, don't touch your face, cover your coughs. That's how it gets transmitted, and so those are the messages. Our message that we're going to be delivering to our customers will be that we're going to be doing our part. We need you to do your part. And I think we're trying to approach this, again, on a fact-based approach. Just touched my face, excuse me. On a fact-based approach, and again, with guidance from the health department and with guidance from the Center for Disease Control. And we are in constant communication, so I'm feeling really good about where we're at in our planning and in our approach to this. If there's no questions on that.
Councilmember Cummings?
More a comment. Thank you for that. And I think as much as we're engaging with the public, that's really important. But I know next week is the Operator Appreciation Day. And I think any of us who use transit are able to pop in and thank the operators is especially valued now because they need to know that they are being looked after and that we support them and that we appreciate all of their efforts to maintain the system.
Thank you. Director Thompson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Also, just to piggyback on that, MTS is following Metro Transit's lead, coordinating well with them. We're sharing our information with contractors and the suburban transit providers so that from a customer side, they see a unified approach to how the transit agencies are dealing with this. So just it's all being coordinated.
Okay. Additional questions on this topic? Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you. Just a quick question. A couple of weeks ago, we had the update about the replacement of the seats in our buses from the cloth to the plastic. Is that something that we're thinking of accelerating, that turnover or that changeover? Because it'll be easier to maintain and be more sanitary to have the plastic seats.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Gonzalez, I don't know that we can accelerate it to the extent that it would help us in this situation, under the timing of this situation. For reasons that are beyond coronavirus, I'd like to get it done as quickly as possible. It's just a better way to keep our it's so much easier to keep our rail cars clean and having the confidence of cleanliness by our customers. So you know, I will tell you that as quick as we can get it done, we will get it done. And once they get manufactured and the seats start coming in, we'll get them installed as quickly as possible for many reasons.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, all right, go ahead.
Maybe I'll move to Transit Driver Appreciation Day, since Councilmember Cummings brought that up. That's, as she mentioned, on March 18th. I so much appreciate you saying that now is really an important time to support our operators and the others that work in our garages and so forth. Breakfast will be served at each of our garages beginning at 4 a.m. and lunch will be served at 11 a.m. In addition, staff will be inviting customers to thank their operators at outreach events held at Maplewood Mall Transit Center from 6 to 8 a.m., Brooklyn Center Transit Center from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., and Southdale Transit Center from 4 to 6 p.m. I know Metro staff are working with your community relations specialists to support your participation in that event, because council members are certainly invited. We'd love to have you attend some of those events. For me, my experience is just going in and saying hi to individuals and telling them that you appreciate their work is really important it's really important for them to hear, and as you mentioned, especially now. So please work with your community relations specialist if you have an interest in attending some of those events on the 18th. As a legislative update, I would want to mention that the forecast was released on February 27 and showed a small increase in the general fund revenue forecast. I believe the increase was 181 million over the November forecast. So the projected surplus is 1.5 billion dollars. MVest also showed a very slight increase in the most of it in the existing year, but it's not enough to really change our story about what we're looking towards in terms of funding needs down the road. It was a small, I believe in my head, it's less than $10 million increase in the MVest, and we were facing, as you know, a $60 million deficit in the calendar year, last half of calendar year 21. Also mentioned that we have St. Patrick's Day free rides on transit. This has been underwritten by Miller Lite, since there are no such things as free rides on transit. And that's been going on for many, many years. So that will also occur, I believe, what day is St. Patrick's Day? The 17th? 17th. God. So 17th, beginning at 6 p.m. Obviously, I'm not enough of a St. Patrick's Day celebrator. I'll get better at that. And then information on Highway 5 and construction plans. I know that Councilmember Ferguson expressed an interest in this to Nick, and we're going to be providing we've added an information item today to talk a little bit about what our service plans are and how we're going to communicate those changes in services, and certainly interested in your feedback and input.
All right, thank you. Any questions for General Manager Koistra? All right, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to business. There are no items on consent tonight. And then our first item of business is item 2020-92, which is the Southwest LRT Third Amendment to the Hennepin County and Hennepin County Regional Authority Capital Grant Agreement. We have Kristen Prescott. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. My name is Kristen Prescott. I'm the Manager of Budget and Grants at the Southwest Light Rail Project Office. And today I'm presenting business item 2020-92, and that's for the Third Amendment to the Hennepin County and Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority Capital Grant Agreement, for the Limited Notice to Proceed, or LNTP period. A little history: in December 2018, the council executed a capital grant agreement with Hennepin County and Hennepin County Regional Rail to provide funding in the amount of about $434.9 million through August of 2019. This funding allowed us to complete engineering, award the civil construction contract, and issue an LNTP for the civil construction work. At that time, it was anticipated that we'd have the full funding grant agreement by August of 2019. Since then, the capital grant agreement has been amended twice. to increase the funding amount to $553.5 million and extended the grant through March of 2020. We now anticipate receiving the FFGA in early to mid 2020, and as a result, we need to amend the capital grant agreement again to increase the amount and extend the grant through June of this year to allow us to continue the civil and systems construction activities. So the recommendation for business item 2020-92 is to authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute the third amendment to the capital grant agreement with Hennepin County and Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority to extend the duration to June 30th, 2020 and add $49.3 million, bringing the total grant amount to $602.8 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the presenter? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve as business item 2020-92.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we are on to business item 2020-64, which is a joint item. It's the 2020 budget amendment for the first quarter. We have Mr. Petrie and Ms. Augustin Heemner. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair, Committee members. Ed Petrie, Metro Transit Finance.
And Heather Augustin Hebner, MTS Finance.
As the Chair just mentioned, we're here to present the first quarter capital amendment. And I will go through the information on Metro Transit. We have both a capital portion and an operating portion. I'll take Metro Transit first, and I will then turn it over to Heather. Okay, for the Metro Transit portion of the amendment this evening, the first part of the amendment is we have a few projects, about 7 or 8 projects that we are ready to close as of this point in time. The projects are done, they have been completed, and we have about just over $11,000 left of funds, mainly local money, RTC money that is left, that we're now going to close those projects and then reallocate that RTC back into the capital program to be used in other projects. The meat of the project, or the meat of the amendment, is just over $67 million in changes for Metro Transit. The changes that we're recommending this evening are all in the CIP. We're recommending and bringing them forward. If you recall, when we adopted the budget back in December, we adopt a 6-year CIP. As funding becomes available, we will then move it from the CIP into the capital budget. And that is what we're recommending this evening, moving projects from the CIP into the authorized capital budget as funding is now available. The projects that we have for the Metro Transit portion is, first of all, this first one is for Southwest. Kristen had mentioned the almost $50 million in funds coming from Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority. So that this evening would be recognizing that money. We have $1.8 million of RTC funds for the new Minneapolis bus garage, which was planned to come in during the year. These funds will be used for the design and construction of our new bus garage. On the D-Line project, we're recognizing $3.5 million in RTC funds. They're for 2 different portions. One is $1.75 million for advanced station construction on the D-Line along Emerson and Fremont. And the other one is $1.75 million for advanced station construction on the D-Line along Portland Avenue in Chicago. Both of these amounts, both of these $1.57 or $75 million are local match to future federal CMAQ funds that we will then be applying for later this year. But this money is available now and it can be used for advanced construction. We have a number of projects that we're bringing forward this evening for recommendation in both in our public facilities and our support facilities capital. We have a $2.8 million project, which is for the Metro Blue Line option note payable for our vehicles. A few years back, we actually negotiated an interest-free 5-year loan with CTIB for $14 million so we could procure 5 vehicles. This will be the last installment that is due on that interest-free loan. It is due at $2.8 million as of the end of June. We also have in our recommendation this evening is IS capital upgrades. It's about $2.7 million. It's for the IS refresh program. We work very closely with the IS department as far as for when the refreshes are going to be happening for our various computers and our systems across our network. It'll include replacement of desktops, laptops, tablets, printers, copiers, some servers, and some video conferencing equipment. And that was all planned. We also have 2 major programs on our rail side for rail overhaul programs. One is $2.5 million of RTC funds for the Type 2 overhauls, which will mainly concentrate on propulsion, braking, and suspension systems, and $1.3 million for the replacement of some deteriorated track and signal components. And with that, Chair, committee members, that is the majority of the items for the Metro Transit portion, just over $67 million. And I would stand for any questions on the capital portion.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Petrie? All right, go ahead.
Okay, then the next item is on the operating side for Metro Transit. We're recommending, it's the same recommendation that we had done last fall also. It's recommending moving $10 million motor vehicle sales tax and VEST revenues, which will be transferred to our capital program, and moving an equal amount of federal dollars, $10 million of federal dollars, up into our operating program. The MVEST funds will be used in our capital program to support the council's authorized capital improvement program, and it's a dollar-for-dollar exchange, so it has no impact on regional MVEST allocations, no impact on MVEST reserves, no impact on operating reserves, and no impact on planned capital projects. It's just a dollar-for-dollar exchange, taking MVEST to capital, making federal funds up into operating. With that, Madam Chair, I'd answer any questions.
Any questions from council members?
Straightforward.
All right, if not, we'll move on to Ms. Augustin-Payne.
Madam Chair, council members, MTS is closing 9 projects totaling just over $4 million. These projects have been completed and unspent funds will be available for future programming. We are also requesting to bring in just over $9 million of RTC for planned bus and technology projects. Projects of note include $3.6 million to upgrade the camera system for Metro Mobility and TransitLink buses, $2.3 million to upgrade the Ranger system, and $2.7 million to replace 4 coach buses for Southwest Transit. All of these projects are in the authorized CIP. As Ed mentioned earlier, most of our budget amendments include administrative adjustments. I think you did, yes.
Yep, yes, I do.
And one of the things that I'll just make sure to do for every budget amendment is to call out any administrative adjustments of note or of regional significance. There's 2 major categories tonight, the first of which is bus buys. We have made administrative adjustments to complete bus buys by essentially we have existing federal money and RTC in the capital program. The feds have asked us to spend down the grants as fast as we can, so we're really just programming the federal money to the bus buys, and we'll hold on to that RTC for future bus buys. The second category is suburban transit provider projects. If you'll remember, when we get dollars that are allocated to the suburban transit providers on the capital side, we bring 100% of that in and put that into an undesignated category so they can access it as it works for them and they aren't tied to our budget cycles. So in this budget amendment, you will see administrative adjustments of MBTA, Southwest Transit, Maple Grove, and Plymouth making adjustments to their project list and their undesignated balances. And with that, I will pause for any questions on the capital side before transitioning to our operating.
Any questions from council members? All right, go ahead.
Okay. On the operating side, MTS is requesting to increase the suburban transit provider pass-through budget by $425,000 to recognize CMAQ federal grant funds for Minnesota Valley Transit Authority's Highway 169 Connector Express service. MTS is also, similar to Metro Transit, requesting to transfer just over $1.8 million of federal funds from our capital program to the operating budget, and for an equal amount of operating dollars to be transferred from the operating budget to the capital program. This allows us to defederalize projects and pay for items not eligible to be funded with regional bonds. This dollar-for-dollar exchange of funds has no impact on regional MVEST allocations, MVEST reserves, or planned capital projects. This is beneficial to suburban transit providers as it provides them more flexibility, and it's beneficial to the council as it allows us to funnel federal funding into a smaller number of larger value projects. MTS typically uses the federal funds to buy buses. This amendment demonstrates commitment towards asset preservation and supports the Thrive outcome of stewardship by assessing future needs, responsible planning, and management of financial resources. Funding added for the Southwest Light Rail and D-Line reflects strategic investment in regional infrastructure that will promote economic competitiveness and increase prosperity in the region. Our proposed action tonight is that you recommend authorization of the Q1 budget amendment as indicated and in accordance with the attached tables. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for the presenter? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-64, joint item.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is business item 2020-97, which is contract with Motor Coach Industries utilizing the AC Transit Coach contract. We have Paul Colton. And welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council members, I'm Paul Colton, Fleet Manager for MTS. And this is one of the items that Heather presented as part of the capital budget amendment. I bring the following staff recommendation to you: that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to exercise bus purchase options utilizing the Alameda Contra Costa Transit District Contract 2020-1436 with Motor Coach Industries to purchase 4 low-flow replacement buses in an amount not to exceed $2,740,000, contingent upon approval of business item 2020-6-JT, which was a previous item. This particular product is a newer product on the market. It's kind of a game changer for folks with disabilities. It has a low floor section that allows them to enter at ground level. It also allows for faster boarding in downtown areas because now it has 2 usable doors to access the bus for passengers. We're fortunate that we're able to partner with AC Transit to be a part of their procurement process to add these 4 buses to their procurement. So we are now in a place where we can exercise those options with the capital amendment. One of the issues that we'll be grappling with in the future is, as we look towards a go out for RFP for coach buses in the future, is the ability to add this item and have a competitive process. So that's one of the things that we will be looking at as we continue to test this particular product with Southwest Transit. With that, I would be glad to entertain any questions on this purchase.
Thank you. We've got Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. I think he might have answered part of my question, and that was, I'm glad about the low floor replacement for accessibility. And looking at, a more competitive process, I want to hear a little bit more about that, because since this is new, is there anything that's comparable that they looked at, or how was the decision made to go with this particular type of bus?
Sure. So kind of a 2-part here.
Go ahead.
Chair Barber, council member. Kind of a 2-part answer on that. So Alameda Contra Costa, they did a competitive RFP. And so what I don't know is how many, the competition for this in the field is already very limited to 2 coach manufacturers in North America, Prevost and MCI. And so I believe that one of the ways that they did this too was a demonstration of boarding time for persons with disabilities. There was a requirement within that RFP, and that's how they addressed that issue. This is, as you state, this is a new product, and so it's right now the only one really on the market in the standard coach field. There are double-decker coaches that have a low-floor section that do have this ability, but also a very significant price tag on that as we research that as well. So one of the things that we've begun looking at in discussions with other fleet staff over at Metro Transit is, as we begin to construct this RFP, is it possible to do this as an option item in the contract? So it's an option that we would pay for as we feel we need that to add to our fleet, or certain buses to add to our fleet. And so it keeps potentially it keeps it a competitive procurement for multiple vendors.
Director Thompson.
Yeah.
And,
Madam Chair, members, I can also add that it's a little unusual that we can go off of another entity's RFP, but FTA does allow that, and then they do certify that it's a competitive process and that. So
Correct.
that allows us to be comfortable partnering with somebody like this on this one, is that we've been assured that they had a competitive process through this effort. So.
did you have a follow-up, Council?
No, that's
Okay.
good. Thank you.
All right, any additional questions? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-97.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we are on to business item 2020-98, sole source procurement of AVL MDT, and we have Paul stay with us. Welcome again.
Great, thank you. Yes, this is another item that Heather mentioned in the Q1 capital amendment. The proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to enter into a sole source agreement with Trapeze Software Group Incorporated for replacement of automated vehicle location, mobile data computer devices for Metromobility and Transit Link fleet in an amount not to exceed $1,590,000, contingent upon the approval of business item 2020-64-JT, the 2020 budget amendment, first quarter. This is a legacy system with Metromobility. It's our scheduling and dispatch software and hardware, and this is the hardware piece. Every vehicle in Metromobility and Transit Link has this onboard computer that tells the driver what their schedule is, has mapping capabilities to help them get to where they need to be in the metro area. We are running on an old system of Trapeze that they are upgrading from a hardware standpoint, and two, they have a six-year useful life, and we are in year 8 of the majority of our units. And so the timing for this replacement is a good one, in that we're taking advantage of this system upgrade and the life of the unit. The second point I wanted to make is that these also serve as our backup for if the system goes down in terms of our cellular connectivity or our Wi-Fi connectivity. The Ranger units can then take over for that, so that we don't lose any information going into the unit. And so our old units are only 3G compatible. The upgrade will allow for that 4G compatibility, and keep the information fresh and updated for our drivers. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions on this project.
Thank you. Councilmember Ferguson.
Will these units also be compatible with 5G?
I don't know. I would have to check on that.
Councilmember?
Just if we're paying to upgrade it now, the question is, are we going to pay to upgrade it in 2 years or 3 years when 5G becomes
the standard? Right.
Director Thompson.
Madam Chair, members, one of the drivers here is that the 3G network itself that is using this is going to be end at the end of 2020, and I don't believe they've given us a roadmap for the 4G network, how long that will live, but our hope is that this will meet our needs as long as the life of the device, as long as the provider continues to maintain a 4G network. I don't believe they have a 5G product that we can get, but we do know the 3G network for sure is going down at the end of 2020.
Okay. Thank you. Additional questions, comments? All right. If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-98.
Motion to approve?
A motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
All right, next we are on to business item 2020-76, Mobility On-Demand Services Pilot Contract. We have Christine Kinnan.
I know I slowly up. I twisted my knee out yesterday worse than I thought I did. So
No fun.
I'm
And
a little slowly.
have a seat and rest your leg.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Christine Kennan. I'm the Senior Manager of Metromobility. Hello again. I'm here to present the business item for Metromobility On-Demand Services Pilot. The item is to award 2 contracts, one to Transportation Plus, who is the existing provider of our taxi service. We've had a taxi service option under Metro Mobility since 2004, and they hold the current contract with Metro Mobility through December of this year, and one to Lyft Incorporated. The service will be delivered as an optional service. It'll be a council subsidized ride and an alternative to the existing premium on-demand taxi service, which I'll explain in a minute. As you know, Metro Mobility is an ADA shared ride public transit service. We're door through door. It's specialized transportation service for certified riders who who are unable to use the regular route system due to a disability or a health condition. Trips provided on the main system must be scheduled 1 to 4 days in advance. As background to this project, many of you remember in June of 2019, I presented an information item talking about the scope of the RFP and the intentions around the RFP, the goals of the project, et cetera. And so this is just the culmination of that work. In the presentation, I talked about how this action fulfills one of the final recommendations in the 2018 Legislative Task Force report, from the Metro Mobility Task Force, that would examine a system for Metro Mobility that would include more travel options for our customers. I also talked in that presentation about how rethinking on-demand services for public transit, in particular for customers certified under the Americans with Disabilities Act, is a national trend and has been introduced with success in many other cities, including Boston, Dallas, Richmond, and others that are embarking on similar pilot projects. In our exploratory process, we conducted several interviews with staff from those agencies, gathered a lot of information, attended webinars, took data sheets that informed the scope of work and the pilot approach. The goal with these contracts is that any Metro Mobility customer who chooses the service, whether they are ambulatory or require a wheelchair accessible vehicle, will have the same convenience as anyone who uses a mobile app to hail a ride to get to work, to school, to social events, or wherever they'd like to travel. Both providers submitted proposals to an RFP issued in July of last year and were responsive to a scope that included the expectation that all our customers will receive comparable service to the general public experience in areas of customer wait times, customer satisfaction, and overall service quality. The contract with Transportation Plus is a newly scoped service contract that will pilot a subsidized on-demand alternative for Metro Mobility certified customers who select the option. Trips are requested directly from the provider through a customized smartphone-based app and that has updated features that are designed to improve the existing booking process. Right now, a customer wanting a ride through our taxi program has to call their regular provider, get authenticated, authorized, and then contact their taxi provider to activate the ride, and it creates some delays, some confusion, and it's not ideal. So this streamlines it, kind of takes the council that phone call, first step phone call out of the equation. Transportation Plus will use the same service delivery approach as they do with private pay rides, use of an app, curb pickup, drop-off, etc. Transportation Plus manages a fleet of vehicles that's about half and half company owned and driver owned, including wheelchair accessible vehicles. With the contract with Lyft, Lyft will be bringing their Lyft Access app to our market and make it available to Metro Mobility customers. This is a product that is available to the general public in other markets, but is not yet available in the Twin Cities. The contract will pilot the same service delivery approach as they currently offer for private pay rides for the general public, including account registration with Lyft, use of an app, curb pickup, drop-off, and prepayment, etc. Customers will request trips directly through Lyft through a smartphone-based app or by phone with the assistance of a reservationist. The wheelchair accessible rides will be accessed via the Lyft app as well and delivered by a subcontractor, Mobility for All, who offers a Wave-equipped fleet brokered model through multiple partnerships to provide wheelchair accessible minivans. Both services will be available to all certified customers within the entirety of the Metro Mobility service area and its associated service hours. This will be accomplished with a behind the scenes in a database where we will be able to define detailed parameters regarding customer eligibility for who can receive the subsidies. This will ensure that customers receiving the subsidy will do so within the bounds of the existing Metro Mobility service area, are authorized as certified customers, and within the same service hours. The faring structure for the service will be the same as it exists with our current model. The $15 subsidy will be applied at the time of the ride request and included in the fare estimate at the time of booking, so that the customer is only shown their portion of the ride. The customer will pay the first $5 of the fare, the council will subsidize the next $15, and then the customer will be accountable for anything over $20. Throughout the pilot, we'll be examining the program for program effectiveness and efficiency, quality of service, and overall satisfaction. Ridership patterns and costs of the program will also be evaluated throughout the pilot. Taking a pilot approach is very important to us, and we understand that this will be a new option, new experience for many of our customers. It is critical to us that we take care to examine the rider experience throughout the project, and for that reason, we have initiated these contracts as a one-year pilot period, beginning upon service launch, with 2 optional single-year contract extensions. It's important to in addition, we'll be developing a robust customer outreach and communications plan in advance of the launch, so that everyone understands the service, both its expected advantages and also its limitations. It's important to remember that this is not intended to be a replacement in any way for our core system, which offers a door-through-door ADA complimentary paratransit service. Customers preferring or requiring that level of service will continue to be served by Metro Mobility's main system, and we will take care to make that clear in our approach. We're very pleased to be offering this new option to our customers. However, I will tell you that we've already started to do some outreach around this when we were gathering information in advance of the RFP release. We went to our customer forums every 6 months, asked some survey questions, and I have to tell you, for as many customers that are really thinking this is a terrible idea, there's as many customers that just want it and crave it and have been asking for it for a long time. I also want to remind that in the Metro Mobility Task Force, in the process of putting together that report, there was a subgroup for customer experience and a subgroup for examining the industry approach to this, addressing all of the issues around customer needs, its limitations, et cetera, and that also did inform our approach to the pilot. So with that, I'll read discuss the rationale of the selection. The following criteria were used to evaluate the proposal. We looked at proposal quality, proposal qualifications, professional competence in the areas directly related to the RFP, experience, and proposal price. The panel was made up of a 5-member panel consisting of staff from Metro Mobility, Metro Transit Office of Strategic Initiatives, MnDOT's Office of Transit, MnDOT's Office of Equity and Diversity, and the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs. With the recommendation, LIFT had the highest ranking technical proposal with a cost that appears fair and reasonable. Additionally, LIFT's proposal demonstrated a strong approach to usability, accessibility, and innovative public transit-oriented partnerships, both as a prime and through its subcontractor, Mobility for All. Transportation Plus had the second highest ranking technical proposal of those that offered both ambulatory and wheelchair accessible service with the lowest average per ride cost. The price appears fair and reasonable. Additionally, their proposal demonstrated a strong commitment to accessibility and sustainability with its provider-owned wheelchair accessible vehicle fleet and its commitment to upfront and ongoing special transportation service training for all its drivers. The cost assumptions for the program are based on ridership patterns of the existing taxi program, and that'll be evaluated, of course, throughout the duration of the pilot. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll read the proposed action that the that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute a contract with Lyft Incorporated and Transportation Plus Incorporated to provide an on-demand ride-hailing service and on-demand taxi service options to Metro Mobility customers for a 1-year pilot period beginning upon service launch, with two optional single-year contract extensions in an amount not to exceed $4,752,537. And with that, I'll take questions.
Thank you. Questions for the presenter? Councilmember Chambliss.
Oh, thank you. I actually have a number of questions, so maybe we'll see how it goes. I have a question. Do you know how many of those taxi rides are over $25? Because I understand that customer pays $5, we would be responsible for $20. So do you know how many times those rides would go over that amount?
Madam Chair, Council Member, there are relatively few. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but it's relatively few. The vast majority of our rides are delivered with the $5 fare.
Okay.
And just to clarify, it's $15 plus 5, so $20.
Oh.
But the vast majority of them are under
Yes.
that amount.
So the customer is obligated for just for the first $5 of the fare for most of our rides. And that is the model under the taxi program that has existed for a number of years.
Okay.
And I would also, I believe as part of the Metro Mobility Task Force, so going back a few years, I helped co-chair that. We did look at some numbers with that, and I think if you look at the report, I believe you should be able to find some more data on that. But that is really what we found. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay. Is there a weight limit? If the person is traveling and they need luggage, is there a weight limit on what the drivers would handle?
Madam Chair, Council Member, I've never looked into that question. I don't know the answer. Madam Chair, I do have, and not for Transportation Plus here, but I do have representatives of Lyft in the audience if you'd like to ask them if they'd be able to answer that question.
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Madam Chair, council members, thanks for allowing me. My name is Chapin Hansen. I'm the general manager for Minnesota. I actually don't know the answer to this question
great.
too. So I'm not going to be of a lot of help in this particular question. What I can say, I've never experienced a situation where somebody wasn't able to get all of their luggage in one of the Lyft vehicles. And as you might know, there are different sizes as well. So there are opportunities if there's a family traveling or somebody has a lot of luggage that they can actually select a larger vehicle that might be able to accommodate that.
And we'll have Director Thompson and Christine get some information, see if there's any limits.
That would be good because I did experience a situation where the driver did not want to pick up my mother's luggage and I had to carry it to the car. And she almost didn't get a ride because he was not going to give her a ride. So that'd be something to look
Madam
at.
Chair, Council Member, I think those are the kind of individual customer experiences that we're going to be wanting to track very closely with this pilot, and we'll be able to do so.
And I would say a part of this is authorizing the negotiation of the contract. So these are things that we can factor in as well. So, go ahead, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. Okay, so the other question is, regarding both of these providers providing curb-to-curb service versus door-to-door service. That's for people who have accessibility issues and limitations. That seems a little bit problematic. Can you explain to me why they don't have door-to-door service?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Council Member, it is not all of our customers are seeking door-through-door service. In fact, we do have customers that have waivers in the system because they do not want that. It's important to remember that this is an option, that this is not ADA paratransit, and as I mentioned, it's going to be very important for us as a program to make that clear, the differences between the services that we provide. So if a customer is looking for that level of service, they should be booking a ride with Metro Mobility. If a customer is just fine with curb to curb, uses it all the time, we've got many loyal customers on our existing taxi program that prefer that. They will have another option with Lyft, and they will have an improved app experience as a Metro Mobility customer with our current provider, Transportation Plus. And they'll be able to rate their drivers. They'll be able to really it's a much more robust customer experience program that we'll be contracting with both providers here.
Okay.
Thank you. You answered two of my other questions.
Very good. Did you have additional questions?
I'm done.
All right, yeah, Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few also. Can you tell me how many proposals there were that were evaluated?
Madam Chair, Council Member, there were 6 proposals.
And then I'm wondering about during the process when you're evaluating, at what point do you decide that you might extend the contract for the second year? And then also, if one of the providers was not providing a service that you were excited about, would you bring in another one possibly for the second year, maintain one and bring in somebody different for the second year, or how might that work?
Madam Chair, all of the above maybe, and that's what the approach of a pilot is all about. What we've written into the scope of work and the expectations of the contract is that within 60 days of the end of each year, the contractor is due to be providing us the data that we need to help us, and throughout actually, the data that we would need to evaluate customer experience, those wait times, the satisfaction, et cetera, that people are receiving from the program. And all of that would be evaluated as far as and enter into the decision of whether or not to option a second year, option a third year, or maybe modify the scope under amendment, et cetera. So we really are just looking to get in to the market. We're responding to the recommendations of the task force report. We're responding to the recommendations of our own customers who are asking for more on-demand system instead of a scheduled 1 to 4 day advance kind of a system with a more modern approach to that.
Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you. And follow up on that then. Am I misunderstanding? Could there be a 6-month gap then from the end of the first year pilot to getting the information and the feedback that you want that before you decide to extend the contract?
Madam Chair, Council Member, no, it would not be intended that there'd be a gap. We would be looking, the beauty of having a contract being proposed for existing taxi contract, it does allow us continuity for our customer base. And we can evaluate the efficacy of both contracts and see what we need to do as far as how to meet the demand of the system. Evaluating that data ongoing, but at least 60 days in advance, will help us do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? All right, I just have a quick comment, and I want to say, okay. Go ahead. Oh, first, Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. So we heard Mr. Slattery express some concerns. I just wondered if staff had a response or
Director Thompson?
Yeah, Madam Chair, council members, these were all issues that definitely came up as we were negotiating or going through the task force about bringing in these services. And I think we tried to address them through what we're requiring in the RFP to get the council comfortable with proposals that met what for insurance and driver background checks. And again, I think from a job standpoint, the existing Metro Mobility contracts will continue actually to grow because that service is growing. This is not, we think this is completely supplementary to that service from our history with taxi. So I think 2 years from now or 2 years from now, there's going to be many more jobs in Metro Mobility because the demand continues to grow. And with the demand growing, we need more drivers. But I think you can be certain that when we negotiate this, we'll definitely make sure that there's the protections that we have on that are satisfactory to the council for insurance, background checks, and who the drivers are, and protection of our customers that we care deeply about.
Councilmember Fredson?
Yeah, and just to follow up, so I do share those concerns. I know that this came up under the previous council, and folks expressed concerns, and we included it in the budget for this year, right? So I do feel. I do have concerns, but it's a pilot, and so I anticipate, supporting this today. But I think it's important that the contract we negotiate addresses those concerns.
I would say I agree completely, and I think if you look at the information that was provided earlier, some of those were questions and surveys we put out to different providers so we could frame the different scopes of service levels. That was really something the Metro Mobility Task Force paid a great deal of attention to and wanted to make sure, because we do understand that our clients need different levels of service, so we wanted to be very cognizant of that as we did that. With that, I just wanted to say that having served on the Metro Mobility Task Force, it's very exciting to see see this. It was a very key thing for that group and a key priority to allow for different service options to give more people more access. And I think this pilot project really is a step in that direction. I think Mr. Finley also served on that. I'll give him a moment to comment, but we put a lot of thought into this, so it's nice to see it moving ahead. Mr. Finley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, council members. You actually set me up kind of nicely with your last comment. Bottom line, this is about choice, is what this is about. The vast majority of folks with disabilities know what's best for themselves, and they want to be able to make decisions based on, what they know what's best for themselves. We're moving away from, a bureaucracy that thinks that it knew what was best for folks with disabilities and it told them how to live their lives and it told them what to do. This is steps in the process of giving folks independence and allowing them to make decisions for themselves. So, I think it's utterly fantastic to give people more options because they know what they want and they just want to be able to choose what's best for themselves.
Thank you. With that, are there any Councilmember Chambliss?
Yes, I'm excited that customers have additional options as well. Having the on-demand service is going to fit and fill a need and a gap. I would like to, I'm looking forward to seeing more materials as this unfolds, the pilot unfolds, and seeing how it works. I'm hoping that there'll be transparencies to the customers on their options in terms of the pros and the cons. They know how safe they are when they use our services. That's really important.
All right, any other additional questions from council members? Right, Director Thompson, you want to comment?
Madam Chair, members, I'd just also like to point out that when council adopted the 2020 budget, you had their strategic initiatives general fund and you voted to allocate $700,000 for an on-demand pilot. And so that is part of this, but obviously the business request is for a larger amount, but $700,000 of what you acted on will be going to this project. And so I just wanted to recognize where that decision, linking that decision for the overall budget, how that goes to this action item too.
All right, any other questions? All right, if not, I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-76.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those nay. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we are on to business item 2020-84, it's master contracts for rail system maintenance. We have Mike Erickson. And Jody Jacoby. Welcome.
Nobody wants to say.
Madam Chair and committee members, I'm Mike Erickson, Traction Power Manager, here with Jody Jacoby, Director of Procurement, to present business item 2020-84 for contract 19P147, approval for 4 master contracts for rail systems maintenance service. 4 contracts have a cumulative value not to exceed $2 million. The vendors are LTK Engineering for $1 million, WSP for $500,000, HDR for $250,000, and Gannett Fleming Transit and Rail Systems for $250,000. Metro Transit has used master contracts for engineering and design services since 2001. Experience has proven that master contracts process to be very successful and efficient in contracting methods for projects like this with a high degree of technical skills. Some of the work includes conducting engineering assisted testing every year for stray current and electromagnetic interference, which is specialized testing to ensure that the rail system continues to operate at a high level. Also needed to acquire assistance for engineering firms for design of system changes that may be for fixing problems found or enhancing our system. Jody will talk about the procurement process.
Madam Chair and committee members, I am here to talk just a little bit about the procurement process. And as part of the council's standard initiation process for projects that exceed $50,000. The project is routed to various different departments throughout the council. And one of those is our Office of Equal Opportunity, where they look at the project, determine how many contractors are available or potentially subcontractors are available in this work, and then they assign a goal. For this specific project, because there was such specialized work to be performed, there was no goal assigned. However, the Office of Equal Opportunity did pass along a few DBE names, and that information was about the advertisement was sent directly to those firms. This is a federally funded procurement for engineering services, and as a result, procurement followed the federal law or process known as Brooks Act, which was enacted in 1972, and it's a qualifications-based selection, and it's a two-step procurement, and the first step is where they technically rank the proposals in their order of qualifications or expertise. And there were 4 proposals submitted for this contract, and so we ranked them from 1 to 4. And then procurement will collaborate with the project manager to try to negotiate pricing, again in that qualification ranked process. And if they're unable to reach a fair price with that firm, that procurement is closed and they move on to the next qualified vendor. The timeline for this process was it was advertised last summer. There were 13 plan holders who downloaded the documents. Procurement in consultation with the project manager facilitated a pre-proposal meeting to help the proposers understand the process and the requirements and give them an opportunity to ask questions. One addenda was issued. There were no questions in relation to the scope, but we did issue an addenda to push out the proposal due date. And the RFP was advertised for a total of 45 days. An evaluation panel was convened, and there were 4 council members who independently reviewed and ranked them. And all 4 of the proposals were reviewed and determined that some work could be allocated to them based on their specialty in the disciplines. And 3 of the 4 proposals voluntarily included subcontracts for those DBEs that we recognize and indicated during the pre-proposal meeting and some of the vendor outreach. So these contracts will be awarded to 4 firms, the 4 firms that provided proposals to meet the requirements. And the dollar amounts vary based on the overall rating and the disciplines that they proposed in. And these contracts will have a term of 3 years.
Madam Chair and committee members, do you have any questions?
Any questions for the presenter? All right, if not, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2020-84.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those nay, motion carries. Thank you. Our last item for business tonight is business item 2020-94, which is the Transportation Committee 2020 Work Plan. We have General Manager Koistra and Director Thompson. Who's first?
I was just looking to see the, so our work plan, thanks Madam Chair and members, we presented, we didn't get a chance to go through it last time, but I think gave you an opportunity to ask any questions or follow up. I don't think we received any specific requests to add any items. But for both MTS and Metro Transit, we take a little different approach to this. The MTS part of the work plan is all the items that our division is working on, many of which will come before this committee through studies, through contracts, through items like you've seen tonight with the lift proposal. That is a work item coming through. I can kind of divide it into 2 areas of major work that tonight is the planning. Their main focus is that they've, as you know, we're adopting the TPP again this year. And so that's a bulk of our planning work. And developing system studies will come following that. Our budget our finance division as routine budget items like the Q1 amendment tonight. Nothing out of the routine for our finance group. And then our contracted services, as you've been seeing tonight in the last few cycles, is we have a lot of procurements this year where we're putting out our services for bid. This is an unusual year where we have more procurements. Just happens that they all lined up. And so the bulk of their work is getting those procurements ready, evaluating them, bringing them to you. And then if we do happen to switch vendors, there's a lot of work for our contracted service staff to make sure that it goes smoothly in switching vendors. So those are just a few of the items I thought I'd highlight in the work plan from the MPS side.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would just add that we approach this by providing most of the information items that we expect to bring before this body, and certainly those include updates on various projects that we have, updates on some of the major capital projects we have, some of the budget activities are going on, some other important sort of real-time issues like operator shortage and updates on those. But I would just add that as issues come up, or as issues that you see you would like more information on, this is obviously not set in stone, and we try to accommodate that. Tonight we added the Highway 5 construction because it was a current issue of interest, and we would always do that. This just sort of gives you the pattern of information items that we'll bring. Often many of these are followed with business items that the information items are setting up.
And just a note to council members, right now the link isn't working on here, but if you go to our last meeting on February 24th on the information item, it's that document that we reviewed. We just didn't talk through it in detail, but nothing has changed from that particular document. So with that, are there any other questions from council members relative to the work plan? All right. And I would just say definitely if there are other things throughout the year that you want to hear about, feel free to reach out to any of us and we'll make sure we incorporate that. But with that, I would entertain a motion then to approve business item 2020-94, the 2020 work plan.
So moved.
A motion, is there a second? Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. So before we move on to information, looking at items that can move on consent to council, I'm going to read the business items because we shifted our numbering. I think 2020-97 can go consent, 98 can go consent, 84 and 94 can go consent. Any other discussion?
Can you
Concerns?
repeat that list again, please?
Pardon? Sure. 2020-97, 98, 84, and 94. So that would put the budget amendment still, the Metro Mobility, and the Southwest LRT contract amendment. Agreed? All right, nodding head, so yes. I'll give you my cheat sheet. All right, then we can move on to information items. First thing we have tonight is 2019 Regional Ridership Report. We have John Harper and Eric Lind. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is John Harper, and I am the Manager of Contracted Transit Service in MTS. And with me tonight is Eric Lind, Manager of Research and Analytics at Metro Transit, and we're here to present to you the 2019 year-end ridership. Very nice. Before I get into the presentation itself, I just want to take a step back and explain to you how we bring forward the ridership. We do a quarterly report to the committee. The first 3 quarters information during the year is framed around Met Council service, so both Metro Transit delivered and contract delivered service. When we get to the end of the year and sum up the year, we then include the other regional providers. So this presentation really is essentially 2 pieces. We'll start with an overall picture of the council ridership, and we'll start with the overall slide here, and this compares 2019 to 2018. You can see the blue line of 2019 is slightly lower than than the ridership in 2018, approximately 3%. I want to point out two items as it relates to this, and that is in the first 2 months of 2019, we had quite a bit of severe weather. We had the polar vortex that we talked about a couple of times in front of this committee in the ridership presentation. Essentially, during that polar vortex period, there were a number of weekdays where the ridership was at the level of a normal Saturday. So the ridership was only a fraction of what we would see on a normal weekday. And so that's what dropped the ridership down in the first couple of months. The overall trend of ridership being slightly lower this year, 2019 than 2018, is also consistent with a national trend in ridership and also a regional trend in ridership that you'll see in just a moment. And we'll talk in more detail about that in just a moment here. So that's the overall picture. If you break it down by mode and type of service, the red bar is the local bus service. The light blue bar, a little bit higher, is our BRT ridership. So the local bus plus the BRT, that is an expanding portion of our service. Those are the real workhorse routes in our service. Also, a large portion of our service is provided by light rail. We'll talk specific numbers on the rail in a second here. So this just breaks down by mode. We have a number of small programs that you can see at the top of each bar on that ridership chart. Looking at the numbers themselves, this shows the various modes of service, and you can see that bus is down about 5%, and we'll break out the various portions of the bus in the next slide. I want to point out, we had a little conversation earlier about Metro Mobility and the expanding Metro Mobility service. Last year, the Metro Mobility service was up only 2% over 2018. That is a bit of a slowdown in the increase. In past years, we have seen a 5 or 6% increase in Metro Mobility, and I would imagine we will see that start to tick up again. There are probably a number of factors included in that slowdown of the increase, but it is still an ever-increasing portion of our ridership. I want to point out one other item on this slide, and that is the van pool program. It is a small program of ours. We are looking at the way that we deliver van pool service in this region and are contemplating adjustments to that program to see if we can increase the market share of van pool. It is a small portion, but an important portion of our work at the council. So to talk about the bus service specifically, this slide shows you the local bus, which is the service that runs back and forth all day, has stops about 8 stops per mile, and applies the arterials back and forth all day, as I said. The bus rapid transit, or the BRT service, is the service that we layer on top of that. That is a much higher speed, less frequent stopping. As we've implemented the A line and the C line, we have seen significant shifting, and Eric will talk about 2 corridors in the next slide where that shifting has occurred. We do have a slight reduction in our express ridership here of about 3%, which is, as I mentioned in the first slide, consistent with regional experience and with national trends in our ridership. So I'm going to hand over the microphone to Eric to talk about our next slide, highlighting 2 of our BRT corridors.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Part of my job is to help look at ridership patterns kind of in a big picture way, to step back from the month-to-month variation, take out the seasonality, and look at long-term trends. And ridership is really an evaluation of our service at its sort of most fundamental level. Are we providing the trips that people want? If we are, they will be riding. And what I want to highlight here is how we have improved service in a couple very key corridors using our arterial BRT program. And this is a combination of lots of different improvements that I'm sure you've heard about before. The A line on Snelling Avenue, which opened in 2016, the C line, which opened just this past June in the Penn Avenue corridor in North Minneapolis, and up to Brooklyn Center. And what I want to just focus on is the red and blue trend lines you see there are what is going on in those corridors 1 year and 2 years prior to the opening of these services. And in both of them, but especially in the C Line's case, you can see a pretty consistent decline happening. And that's sort of what's going on in a lot of our local bus system right now. Steady decline from very high levels, and there's still a lot of people riding, but the overall trend is to decline. And what you can see very dramatically is what happens when we implement fast, frequent, all day, all weekend, 10-minute service, the ridership response. So people ride more often, we get new riders, and what we've seen is 30% or greater increases in these corridors with this new service opening. In the case of the A line, it's continued to grow over time, as you can see in that green trend line on the top. And we've really expect that with the ability to do this treatment on some of our other very busy local bus routes, like Route 5 turning to the D line, Route 21 to the B line, we hope to see similar increases in ridership with those improvements.
Good. This slide just brings in the regional providers, and as I mentioned, the trend across the region is a slight decrease in ridership, roughly in that 2 to 3% range. These providers are primarily express riders. MBTA has local service. The others are almost exclusively express providers of service, and so you can see that 3% decrease in their service. That matches the decrease of 3% approximately in the council service. So ridership is a little bit of a mixed bag. There's some good things going on. There's some challenges that we have in our service that we've talked about here. And to summarize, we have seen success when we have done service improvements, as Eric talked about, BRT treatments, local route improvements that might be improved frequency, increased frequency, and bus stop improvements. We also saw an increase along 35W as the construction was implemented in that corridor, and driving to downtown became more difficult from the southern suburbs. And want to point out, in the light rail mode, we have seen the average weekday ridership well above federal funding forecast levels, federal funding grant agreement levels that were forecasted. On the blue line, we're 34% above the 2020 level, and on the green line, we are 7%. So we are seeing very high ridership on those two lines that are above what was projected in that funding agreement. We do have some challenges. The school closures, as we talked about, seeing Saturday level ridership on weekday service really brought our ridership down on a few days in the early part of 2019. We've had some difficulty with operator shortages at Metro Transit, and missing some service in that, of course, causes some difficulty. And long-term and macroeconomic trends, this is in Eric's court definitely, that we have system pressures that are pushing our ridership down ever so slightly, and being competitive and providing choice that we've talked about in a previous business item tonight really can help us bolster our ridership and be competitive with low fuel prices. I understand oil is only like $30 or $40 a gallon now, so really the pressure of cheap fuel, auto availability is a pressure that we face. So with that, Eric can answer all your questions. No, we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you both brought crystal balls, did you? So I guess my question is, so the consequences of the decrease, the drop in ridership and so forth, and you analyze it all the time, and then you have, I mean, you're talking about the polar vortex, which was like a couple of months last year, we may be looking at a really extended period of time that could impact on ridership and transit and transportation. So how do you, of course I'm talking about the virus, how do you kind of factor that in when you are looking back or looking ahead? And also then if people decide, well, I'm not going to take public transportation, I'm going to drive my car because gas is cheap and I don't want to be potentially infected, how do we lure those riders back to the system when things calm down?
Madam Chair and committee members, that's a great question. I think we are, as General Manager indicated, we've got a lot of plans in place for doing what we can to make sure that we're still giving safe rides for people who travel with our system. I also think that, you know, if we go to a period of school closures and, you know, work closures, we will definitely be impacted in our ridership, and we'll have to take that into account as we're looking at the success of our service. One of the big trends that's also concordant with this kind of national transit decline is just regular telework. So the more that people stay home 1 or 2 days a week as part of their regular business, that can really impact our service. And if you just think about a single person who's a person who's commuting, you know, every day on transit is now working at home. Well, that's 20% of their regular ridership. You know, two rides out of 10. So the more that the coronavirus is shifting people towards working at home or more isolation, it's definitely going to have an impact on our ridership. But I think the important part is that we're going to be running a safe system and doing what we can to keep providing those rides for people who need it. To your question about, you know, if once people start leaving the system, how do we bring them back? I think again, we have the advantage of transit, of being able to move lots of people really efficiently to places where lots of people want to go. That beats congestion. It gets rid of worries about parking. We have a lot of structural advantages that will still apply no matter how cheap gas is. So we have to emphasize the things that we do really well, provide reliable, fast service, and I think that will help people come back to the system if they leave.
General Manager Koister.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, you know, we of course want to grow service and want to grow ridership, and the emphasis on arterial bus rapid transit is one of the ways that we think a major strategy for doing that. There's also reasons that transit ridership may be down that are good reasons. If it's use of bikes, if it's use of scooters, if it has to do with telecommuting. My point is, part of our goal is to reduce congestion, and if the reasons that the transit ridership is down still reduces congestion, then that's not as bothersome as those reasons that may actually increase congestion and increase those goals. So we're working really hard to try to understand what those factors are. Eric's a big part of that work. We have surveys out to riders and former riders and those who are not riding to try to understand how we can do a better job. So I don't want to move away from we want to grow ridership. We of course want to grow ridership, but there are so many reasons why ridership might be down, and some of them are helping us reduce congestion.
Thank you. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thanks. I'm kind of curious about where Vanpool has been and where it's going. I don't need the historical information, but you know, there are times where there are folks that are maybe not on a regular route, or it's outside, they need transportation outside of the times that are on the schedule. I think that if we can improve that, that would really enhance our service to customers. So I'm curious about what the plans are, and if you don't have them now, that's fine, but I'd like to know that.
Sure, Madam Chair and committee member. Our van pooling program, Metro Van Pool, has been in place since approximately 2000. We have, since that time, really emphasized the availability of that mode, of that service in those kinds of areas where the regular route service that we provide doesn't suit the needs. We have really de-emphasized trips to downtown because we have a very robust express network with park and rides and a lot of availability. And we've been trying to focus, as I say, in the suburban areas. The difficulty in a van pool program is you have to find 5 or more people who are doing the same commute. And organizing that gets to be very complicated. You can't just say, the bus is here, go get it or not. You have to say, you're interested, now go find 4 more people. Then we can talk, and then we can figure out how to make it all work. And so it's a complicated message. We are reviewing how we do our van pool program. We today subsidize 50 or 55% of the lease price of the vehicle from the vendor that we've contracted to do the leasing for us or the rental for us. Enterprise is our vendor. But we're looking at, are there different ways that we can structure it to make it a simpler program? We have removed the downtown restriction that we've had, that where we will not duplicate our regular route service into downtown, because we know there are some people who are providing choice, which I guess is the theme of the evening here, to say, that some people might prefer van pooling with people that the same 4 or 5 or 6 people they work with, rather than utilizing the transit service that we put out. And so we're working through that. And in this region, in the spread out, low congestion area that we're at, it's a difficult program to sell in really high numbers, right? But we are really investigating that to try to increase those numbers. Thank you.
Councilmember Sterner.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question kind of regarding like the North Star. It seems like it's kind of an outlier where you got the growth of St. Cloud but other light rail and our BRT is growing, but that seems to be in decline. Is there reasons for that, or how we can beef up the rides on that?
Thanks, Chair and committee member. We saw a slight decline in North Star. However, it's a pretty stable, robust system on the weekday basis. A lot of the variation from year to year is about the weekend service, so whether there are a certain number of Vikings games or Twins games we're running extra service and how well attended those are. We saw a big jump a couple years ago when there was a lot of construction on 94 north of downtown Minneapolis, where people were switching over to North Star to avoid that congestion in their cars, and it may have gone back the other way where people went back to the highway kind of once it was open. But there's not a drastic drop in North Star. It's pretty stable. So.
It's a weekend thing.
Councilmember Sterner.
All right, just I know Mr. Koister kind of brought that up a little bit too, but like as far as the individual riders, because we're looking like big picture, but also like the thing of perceived safety or actual safety or biohazards, and the continuity of the route where there's gaps in. Are we getting those kind of polls and seeing where people are and how we can improve ridership and maybe tweak the system a little bit in certain places as well?
Yes, Chair and committee member, the general manager mentioned we have a survey that's active. We're going to hear results very shortly about what people who used to be regular riders and are not anymore, kind of some of the factors that have gone into their decision making. When we survey our own riders regularly, we always get the message that in addition to fast, frequent service, feeling safe and secure on board is another really top priority. So we've obviously made that a top priority of what we're doing at Metro Transit, and we know that people will not ride if they don't feel safe and secure. So that's always in the front of kind of what we're trying to provide. To the degree, is it one thing or another? Unfortunately, back to this sort of macroeconomic analysis, we have a lot of trends that might be pointing just the same way. So a lot of little things that are adding up to a lot of decisions where people are not riding as much as they used to, or maybe not at all. So I don't think we can isolate any one particular thing, but all we can do is control the things that we can control to make the best experience possible.
And just one follow-up. So with that, like with marketing, I know you kind of mentioned like the benefits of transit being like take a large amount of people, a certain, short distance, avoiding the parking and all that. With some of our message to the marketing, can we make those tweaks in it to where increase the ridership on, how safe it is or clean it is or how fun it is, how you reduce the carbon footprint, that kind of stuff.
Madam Chair and committee member, I was looking for Bruce Howard, who's here. So he's our marketing director. I'll let him tackle that.
Okay, all right, thank you. I was going to say, Madam Chair and committee member, I do want to mention that from the customer perspective, the experience on the vehicle is only part of the experience that they have. Getting to and from the stop, the wait at the stop, those are equally important to that customer experience. And we do have a better bus stop program, can I name that right? You know, where we are improving our bus stops, better amenities at the stops. In this BRT program, our stops have more amenities. They're lighted. There's when the next vehicle will arrive. There's call buttons, these kinds of things that will make waiting for the vehicle as safe as being on the vehicle, because there are those experiences. And I think we need to also work with the communities. It's really a partnership to ensure that the walk to and from the bus is safe. And that goes beyond what we can do, but we can certainly partner with cities and partner with other jurisdictions to help in that arena as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions? Just a quick comment. I think that you put it well, like the topic of the evening is about choices and offering different options because people are moving around differently and it's really a multimodal approach. And I think that we as a council are really looking at things that way. And even though we were talking about some ups and downs in numbers, I think it's always nice to say that we did provide over 91.5 million rides last year, so, which is always a good note to end on. So thank you very much. All right, next we are on to, we've got the regional route performance analysis. We have Daniel Pena.
Good evening, Madam Chair, council members. I'm Daniel Pena, a planner with the multimodal planning team with in MTS. And I'm here today to talk about the regional route performance analysis. So on the agenda today, we're just going to talk about the purpose of this analysis, what it is, the transit performance standards that we use within the analysis, and going to go over some of the high-level findings of the most recently completed route analysis, which was in 2018. So the purpose. Each year, the Metropolitan Council evaluates how well transit is performing in the region with using our performance measure standards that have been adopted in the Transportation Policy Plan, of which there is two, and I'll get into that in the next couple slides. And this analysis analyzes all service at the route level, so on a route-by-route basis, how well is transit performing compared to our performance standards, and it accounts for all transit providers in the region. So the primary goal of this analysis is to serve as a tool to help or achieve our regional goals for the transit system of having an efficient and effective transit system. The performance measures help identify unproductive routes and which may be the target of service changes with the service providers. This analysis is really meant to serve as a tool for service providers to help balance cost and ridership amongst their routes. And as our director, Nick Thompson, mentioned before, the service allocation study, which we're currently undergoing now, may provide some alternative or additional performance measures that we might use in subsequent route analyses that more accurately affect the different rules that we have for transit in the region. So the performance standards that we use to measure success in the route analysis have been adopted, and they are found in the Transportation Policy Plan in Appendix G. These performance standards, there's two, are used to measure the relative effectiveness and efficiency of transit services on a route basis. The effectiveness standard that we have is subsidy per passenger, so how much subsidy required per passenger trip. And our efficiency measure is also our productivity measure, and that's measured as passengers served per in-service hour. So the cost effectiveness measure, again, is subsidy per passenger. We categorize routes into different threshold levels, with each level associated with a recommended monitoring goal and potential actions that service providers can take. Route could either meet standards, or we have thresholds levels 1, 2, and 3. 1 being the threshold level of least concern, where there's a quick review and a service provider could potentially make minor modifications to a route. And the most substantial threshold level being threshold level 3, where we recommend that the service provider make a significant change to a route, and potential actions that a service provider can take are they could either restructure or eliminate the route. And for cost effectiveness, we measure the subsidy of a route by comparing it to the average subsidy of its route type. So for example, if we have a commuter route, we would compare it to the average subsidy required to operate all commuter routes. So, and from here on out, I'm going to be going into some tables. They're pretty substantial, but you could look more into them in the actual route analysis report itself. So the highest subsidies per passenger are in our dial-a-ride service and our commuter rail services. Suburban local services has the highest proportion of routes in tier level 3, 25% of our suburban local routes in the region are tier level 3. And core local bus services and commuter express services have around 75 to 80% of their routes meeting subsidy standards. And lowest subsidy standards that we're finding are in our transitway systems. Light rail, average 179, interior BRT 364, and from there core local and onwards. This table breaks down the average subsidy per passenger on each route type with each service provider. Maple Grove has the lowest subsidy per passenger. That's mostly a result of it being one of the smaller systems in the region, and mostly providing downtown-oriented commuter express services, which are pretty cost-effective. Metro Transit has the next lowest subsidy per passenger. That's because it does run a fair share of high-efficiency routes, along with the more effective transit ways, like our ABRT system and our light rail services. This is 2018, so it doesn't account for the C line. MTS has a pretty substantial subsidy per passenger, but that's mostly a consequence of the amount of dial-a-ride services that it provides in the region. Dial-a-ride services, by their nature, are more expensive on a per-trip basis. And the other suburban transit providers have similar subsidies per passenger trip at around $7 per hour. Now, we also have the other performance standard that we have is our productivity standards. These are more simple than the subsidy per passenger standards that we have because they're static. Each route type has a route average minimum that it has to meet, and it also has a minimum per trip that it has to meet. Different productivity thresholds are there to help reflect the fact that different route types have different levels of demand. So among bus services, they have a minimum threshold of 20 passengers per hour that they should be meeting. And suburban local, since they're serving areas with lower levels of demand, they have a mandated threshold of 10 passengers per trip per route. So again, with our performance standards, suburban local has the greatest amount of routes that aren't meeting our productivity standards. Around 40% of suburban local routes aren't meeting standards. Most core local routes are meeting standards. Only one route fell below the threshold that we had mandated. 72% of commuter express routes are meeting our standards. And this here is just a summary of the route type of the two performance metrics that we account for in the TPP and in this analysis. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. You could also find attached a link to the route analysis where you can download the report.
Councilmember Chambliss.
I feel like I got a lot of questions.
That's all right.
Okay, so I have a question about new, like a new park and ride, for example.
Mhm.
How do we, you know, if you don't have the history there, how do we decide that it's going to meet our standards?
That right there, we don't have, I'm not sure if we have policy thresholds or standards for dictating that, but we do have certain tools to help us model the amount of potential demand that is there. So that'd be on a case-by-case basis. We have a park and ride demand model that was developed for us by a consultant.
And Mr. Harrington.
And I think
Adam.
Hi, Madam Chair, Adam Harrington, Director of Service Development. I think the answer to the question, Council Member, is how do we estimate future ridership when we don't have a basis to understand it? And specifically about park and ride, we do have a methodology to estimate park and ride ridership because we have a better sense of what the ridership pattern might be. Because the park and ride is going to downtown Minneapolis, we can determine through license plate survey and through Department of Labor where people live and where they work generally, not specifically, so we can understand in a given census tract how many people work in downtown Minneapolis, and then we can estimate what percentage of those people might take transit depending on how close it is to their house. So we have a way to estimate it fairly successfully when we look back on our history of doing this estimation of being reasonably accurate. It's much more difficult when you're looking at local bus or suburban local bus or even arterial BRT to identify with reasonable certainty how future ridership might be, especially if there's not a route there now. But we might look at what the peer routes are around the region, what are similar routes that we operate and how do they perform in a similar environment, and try and apply that when we're looking at near-term adjustments. Now, long-term, larger scale projects, we'd use the regional forecast model, and that is a complicated mechanism to estimate ridership for a particular corridor or group of routes.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Okay, so the reason why I asked that question was, well, for the park and rides, but also just how do we decide, like, where we would want to put a BRT, for example. And you'd probably be looking at different things. I know I had spoke with you at one point about, you know, looking at, you know, how many people might be going to a particular college, for example. So I just, this is interesting to me as we look, as more and more people become commuters in the suburbs. I'd be interested in looking at how we're doing that forecasting and how we're doing that analysis.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, we'd be happy to have that conversation.
Okay.
And if I might just add a quick comment, I think we've talked a little bit about the joint efforts going on between Metro Transit with Network Next and MTS with the service transit values planning, and it's looking in some of those areas of where something may not meet some predefined productivity or cost effectiveness. What other values do we want to build into it? What is important? Are we moving someone to a medical center or to a school or something like that? And I think that we're definitely looking at things that way, but this helps sort of set a framework for what the system looks like today. General Director Thompson.
Madam Chair, members, just a couple examples that have come before this committee of how these performance measures have been used in the past. I think last year, or maybe 2 years ago, we eliminated a route in the western suburbs that served through Minnetonka. They were looking at these performance measures as not meeting productivity or subsidy at the route level. Many changes were tried first in order to try to improve that, but eventually the decision was made that it just was nowhere near what was needed for performance on that route. So an action was taken to eliminate that route. An example also on the red line, we were not meeting the productivity for passengers per hour on that for transitways, and we tried many different changes to boost that, but in the end, we reduced the service from 15-minute service to 20-minute service, and we're able to get that productivity back up, and that change can be made. If it grows again in the future, we can switch back to 15 minutes. But just two examples of how the staff uses these performance measures set in the TPP to kind of really look at the route level and try to make sure that routes are performing, and if they're not, try to make some changes to make them work better.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? Councilmember Sterner.
Yeah, just a segue, thank you, Chair, on that. So I'm looking at like some of the difference in the pricing, and I suppose part of that's the efficiency, like where you're looking at Plymouth, for example, $39 for a dial ride, but if you look at other possible things to try to reduce that, but that's kind of what we look at, right, where such a disparity with cost of ride, depending on what type of service, and is that right?
Madam Chair, members, yes, we look at that, but this is information like we would provide to Plymouth, and they measure against the goals in the TPP, but they make the operational decision at the provider level whether they want to make some changes. They may say there's certain reasons we're okay with that subsidy that high because it's serving these key locations in our city. So it's an operator by operator level decision whether they make changes. We in MTS and Metro Transit definitely use this and do make changes as operators of these systems when we're not meeting performance thresholds. But you do see some variation across providers.
Councilmember Sterner.
Okay, then I obviously would probably provide them with the tools if they wanted to make changes, what we see, or our experts on the company, that kind of thing, too, as
Madam
well.
Chair, members, yes, definitely. It's a partnership. We work with them. And this report is a good tool to show for all service in the region at each route level, how is it performing? And they get to see that data too and see how they're performing. And they're continuously making changes, trying to make improvements.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions or comments? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to our last information item for the evening. We have Highway 5 construction transit plans. We have Adam Harrington and Bruce Howard.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, council members. I'm Adam Harrington, the Director of Service Development, and Bruce Howard is with me. We'll be talking about a project that is going to have a significant impact on our travelers in the region, both locally but also around the state. As we know, the airport draws people from all over. And beginning sometime in April, MnDOT will begin construction on Highway 5 between the Mississippi River and 494, and they'll be repaving the surface, repairing about 12 bridges and some of the on and off ramps that serve this corridor and the airport in particular. And so in order to do this as expeditiously as they can, they'll be closing entirely one direction at a time in order to complete that work. So it's going to have a very big impact. The results of the idea to take the strategy to complete the work, MnDOT has been working very closely with Metro Transit and the Metropolitan Airports Commission, and we've been working together to identify how we want to best manage this situation moving forward. And so Bruce and I will talk a little bit about what the impacts are to our transit service and how we're promoting that service this year. This is a map of the airport, and it shows Blue Line, Metro Blue Line LRT, in the dark blue, and then the light blue is the Route 54, which comes from downtown St. Paul, West 7th Street, to the airport in Mall of America. They both are primary routes that serve the airport, and we're really happy to be part of the solution during the construction project with Blue Line LRT because it'll be a great option. It is a great option today, as I'm sure everyone here knows, and we're doing our best to help promote that service. It's about a 25-minute trip from the warehouse district down to Terminal 1, and it operates very frequently, and we're going to be encouraging our customers and new customers, hopefully, to connect at any one of those 19 stations on Blue Line, whether it's on bus or you're getting dropped off, to use that to get to the airport. Also, we have a high-frequency Route 54, which provides high-frequency service on West 7th. This blue line represents our detour alignment, which we'll be employing when construction begins. The actual schedule accommodates this detour beginning on next Saturday, but we are not going to be implementing it until the road is closed, and we're working closely on communication with that. This detour allows us to serve all the bus stops on West 7th Street and a single seat ride through that area. However, we are going to be asking our customers to make a transfer and connect at American Boulevard Station to get on Blue Line to get to Terminal 2 or Terminal 1, which will continue in operation. So it's a big impact to those customers, and some of the trips that we operate early morning. The exclusive reason that we operate them is to carry employees to the airport. We'll be going directly to Terminal 1 because that's the only reason we operate that service. So it might be an even longer trip for them, but we're wanting to make sure that they have that direct service because that's the purpose of that trip. We'll be notifying our customers about this. It's right now the Route 54 is about a 25-minute trip between downtown St. Paul and Terminal 1, and this could add 10 to 15 minutes depending on the circumstances. But we know, based on the road closure, that it'll be much more reliable than trying to navigate through what traffic remains in that congested area. So our key is to maintain reliable service throughout this project. So there's a couple ways that we're communicating to our customers, and I'll let Bruce talk about that.
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam Chair and council members. Again, Bruce Howard, Director of Marketing and Transit Information. While I'm going to run through a couple slides here talking about our marketing and communications plan, Adam's going to be distributing a copy of the brochure that you actually see the cover here on the screen. We don't have these printed quite yet, but we made copies for you just to have the information available so you had the understanding of what will be in the brochure that we'll be distributing later on. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing for our existing customers on Route 54 specifically, and then some things that we're doing for the general public, and then the last slide will just talk about some other ideas that we're kicking around here with this project. So here you see a list of some of the things we're doing to communicate to customers. Connect newsletter, that's our monthly newsletter that is available on demand through an electronic version, or you can actually get it on the bus 4 times a year when we have our schedule changes. So that will be coming out here prior to the changes, letting people know that Route 54 will be doing what Adam described on the detour. The pocket schedule is reprinted, obviously having that detour information in it, and the special note, again, talking about when we switch over to the detour when construction starts. As I mentioned, the brochure is what you have a copy of in front of you today. And then when we get ready to actually make the switch over, we're actually going to be out doing some on-street customer outreach, handing out the brochure, trying to answer questions for people, making sure that everyone understands the detour and then what's happening with service. Customers can also sign up for rider alerts that we have, so you can go on to the website and sign up to get a rider alert sent to you on Route 54. If there's changes to that route, we'll either send you an email or a text, and you can sign up to do that. We're also obviously going to be posting rider alerts out at bus stops, and then we'll be using social media to update people on the project as well. So in terms of some general awareness to the riding public and driving public and those that we hope will take Metro Transit to the airport here, the campaign that we've come up with is Take the Train to the Plane, and you can see a little bit of the creative there on the right-hand side. We'll be putting up that creative in a digital ads. We'll be using it in social media. We'll be putting it in other places around the region, making sure that people understand that the Blue Line is going to be the best way to get out to the airport once Highway 5 is under construction there. Also, using all of our transit media assets that we have, so our bus sides, those kinds of things, station kiosks, getting that same message out about taking the train to the plane. We'll be working with, and already have been working with, employers, convention and visitor bureaus, and getting information out to them about how they can help promote taking Metro Transit, and specifically the Blue Line, out to the airport when the Highway 5 is under construction. We have marketing staff that have been working closely with folks at MAC and MSP employees to make sure they get information about the detour and options available. And then lastly, we'll just mention a couple of additional ideas that we're still working on here, some of them perhaps a little bit non-traditional. The Ramp, Ride, and Fly program is actually a program that's been around for quite a while. It's kind of counterintuitive. You might think, well, go downtown Minneapolis to park to go to the airport. That seems kind of strange. But if you go to Ramp A in downtown Minneapolis and you can actually register to park there and go to the airport, you can park for $5 in Ramp A. And then take light rail out to the airport. So that's something that we want to, again, promote. Again, it's been around for a while, but we think it has a little more relevance now with the construction starting. We heard from Christine Kennan about the lift contract that they're working on here. So another thought we had is to see if we can do a partnership with Lyft to actually take people to some of the Blue Line stations. They did something with us for State Fair last year where we actually had them bring people to some of our park and ride locations, and people got a discount on that. So it's an option. Again, if people can get over to the Blue Line, it's going to be way easier than, of course, trying to drive over there. And then we already have some partnerships with our hotels. We're working on getting some discount passes out to them. If they buy transit passes in bulk, we'll give them some discounts. That's a relationship that we have already, and we're going to continue to try and promote that. And then finally, just another idea that we want to perhaps have some more conversation with is working with MAC and or MSP employers out there to see if we can get some of those employees to park at our 28th Avenue Park and Ride. It's about 1,500 spaces, of which about 800 are full, and we have about 700-800 spaces available. So if there's something that we can work out there in terms of an agreement with them, we think that might be valuable to divert some of those employees over there and have them take the train over from 28th Avenue. So that's what we have. I guess we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Councilmember Ferguson.
How long can you park in the park and ride for?
So, Council Member, the 28th Avenue Chair and Council Member, 20th Avenue park and ride. Yeah, there's no overnight parking there, so you wouldn't be able to do that. But if you're just going to the airport for work, you can certainly do that.
If somebody if they worked overnight, then that's probably a different option.
No, we could probably figure something out on how to do that. That's what I'm talking about. We want to work out those details to make sure that that's something that we could do. And, for the short term, during the duration, we think that there's some possibilities because we have the capacity there.
If we will, when Delta sends their emails out to people, will we be in that email? Says here's an option for you to get to the airport, or are we coordinated with Delta and Sun Country on those emails?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Council Member, I cannot speak specifically to Delta. I know that one of my staff has been working with the MAC folks to get the information out. So I assume that we'll probably be able to get that in there, but I can double check and see what we've heard back from them.
Okay, and if you need, because the government affairs people for Delta are on the board as well.
Sure.
For Minneapolis Chamber, so you can reach out directly to them and just see. Because my sense is that they don't want planes to get delayed, so the more people that get there on time, they're going to try to work to do anything they can. So.
Okay. Additional questions? Councilmember Fredson.
Thank you, Chair. Do we know that there's not going to be any major construction on 35E or 494, just for folks that are rerouted right to potentially run into backups?
Well, Madam Chair, Councilmember, it's an excellent question because we run into competing construction projects in other parts of the metro area, but I think in this particular case, during the construction of Highway 5, MnDOT is trying to keep those other corridors open.
Okay. Additional questions? I do have one question for park and rides, because I think this is somewhat Councilmember Ferguson was kind of talking about parking and overnight parking. I can see people utilizing our park and rides that way because they typically do that even if it's just an overnight trip. However, what's our plan to respond if we find people doing that or communicating that that isn't an option? Because some of them are pretty wide open.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Council members, I think that's something that we need to look at, specifically at 28th Avenue there, because it is an option. I think that some of the employees, would take if we could figure out how to do that exactly. So I don't have the exact answer tonight, but because we know that we have space and capacity there, I think it's something that we should look at and how we're going to do that. Typically, as we said, we don't allow overnight parking just simply because people would fill up that ramp in a hurry if they could do that. So.
Yeah, I did look at Bloomington Central too.
Yeah.
Councilmember Ferguson.
With our kiosks, would there be a way, let's say we could, if someone wanted to do that, they could pay they could have a parking fee, they could get a ticket or something and put it in their window, and it'd be a revenue source for us, and
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember, we can look at it. We haven't got to that level yet, I don't think, but certainly we can kick around those ideas.
just a thought.
Okay. All right. Any other additional questions? Councilmember Fredson?
Thank you, Chair. What time do the flights start departing MSP?
I think the first flight's just a little bit after 5 a.m. is a Delta flight to Atlanta.
Okay, and a follow-up, or in the Blue Line hours are start at 4? The trains start running at 4?
Yep.
Okay.
Right, there's constant service between terminals, but yes.
Right, yeah. So I guess the spirit of my question, right, was if we're asking folks to take the train to the plane and just expecting that there will be more reliance on the LRT service, just to make sure that we're providing folks with the opportunity to get to the airport well in advance of whenever their flights are leaving. So I don't know if our current schedule actually does that. I mean, according to how they ask us to show up either 2 to 3 hours ahead of time.
Mr. Harrington?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, yes, we do have a very wide span of service on both the 54 and the Blue Line. So I think we're well accommodated. Does get to be a little bit thinner in frequency when you get past midnight, but we do provide service then as well.
And Madam Chair, council members, I'll just add that we're updating the airport page on the website with all this information so that if you get questions and you want to direct people someplace, that would probably be a good place for them to start. I mean, they certainly can call Metro Transit as well, but go to the webpage, metrotransit.org/airport, and we'll have the information there.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? All right, then thank you. And then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion?